Yeah, that's me, chasing that Best Actor Oscar back in 2008 when I made a more than 2-hour long movie called They Came Back with some friends. In it, I am the spirit of a dead man who, in this scene, is slowly being taken over by Satan through the use of a montage of old movie clips, specifically from film noirs.
All this you see, it's all a product of one mind. The mind of a man named, say the name.
But not just any film noirs. Public domain film noirs. During this time, I had developed an unending love of film noir, and today, both of these shelves right here, all of these movies, are film noirs. This is what an 18-year-long love has produced. But it all started with just a few little collections, all of which I had fished out of the world of public domain. Way back in the middle 2000s, I'd heard of the public domain but didn't know much about it. By short definition, the public domain is a collection of creative materials, be they films, songs, books, etc., that are not protected by intellectual property laws such as copyright, trademark, or patent laws. These works are thus owned by the public to be used as they wish. This hasn't prevented some from making mild alterations to public domain works and trying to slap a fresh copyright on them, sometimes successfully. Upon getting to know it a little bit better, the public domain has become a fascination of mine. A couple years back, I did a 2-part series focused on public domain cartoons and the sketchiness of many of those early public domain distributors. Y'all know I love a good sketchy history. Not only did this particular history fascinate me, but I grew up with mainly public domain cartoon VHS tapes. While that particular history had an effect on me as a child, fast forwarding to my early adult years, and once again, I developed a new fascination sparked by public domain content. So let's dive in. I'm gonna try to have some fun with this. I started college in the fall of 2004 and quickly found myself falling in love with these 4-hour-long, once-a-week writing and film classes they offered. I took just about every film studies class available, but I took the first of these in the spring of 2006, a class modestly called American Film. I saw so many classics for the first time there. Some Like It Hot, Sunset Boulevard, Singin' in the Rain, and so on. But one week we dove into film noir, which I had hardly a novice understanding of at the time. But after watching Double Indemnity for the first time, as well as an hour-long documentary about the style, I fell madly in love with it in ways I never had for a particular type or style of film before or since. Sticking with the simple definition of film noir, which translates to black film, it is a style of film often consisting of cynical, pessimistic, and or fatalist themes. They are often crime and or thriller-centered films existing mainly in the period from, as far as I'm concerned, 1941 to 1958, although obviously there are potential outliers. The stories are often bleak, with leads that aren't very sympathetic or who come from the wrong side of the track, so to speak. Everyone has their own perspective on noir and its many facets, and some will take you to the mat over those elements, so I'll just wrap my definitions there. Alas, I feel in recent years film noir is mostly remembered for how it is parodied and how it's stereotyped. When we think of noirs, we see the rough around the edges detective sitting in his dark office, investigating through exhaustion, looking for answers with his trusty ashtray and glass of choice alcohol at his side. And that's certainly part of it, but the way noir is parodied now glosses over how diverse the style really was. And I'm saying that as someone who loves a good crime drama. After taking that American film class, I was overwhelmed. I had discovered there was this whole massive collection of film that I'd never even scratched the surface of. And my God, did I want in. I still remember the day. It was the summer of '06. After school had let out, my best friend was back from college, and one day we went to the mall together, stopping off at an FYE store. No expectations. I just kept my eyes open, hoping on a whim that I might find a noir somewhere. And then I saw it. 10 movies, $9.99. Not giving a second thought to the notion of the public domain, I snagged this off the shelf. Upon going home, not expecting anything, I suddenly owned 10 film noirs. Maybe it sounds crazy, but I was over the moon. I still have that collection, only not the original one I bought. I loaned that one to a friend many years ago and never got it back. But it was such a coveted item that a couple years ago I bought the same collection again, on eBay just to have it. It was missing the last disc, but hey, that just gives it more charm. But that's where it all started. My first collections of film noir, as I'd later realize, were all public domain content. That's how it started. All these other noirs I've obtained over the years likely never would have been if it weren't for these early purchases. And while I look back at the public domain cartoons as the older and lesser entertaining childhood fare that was available to me compared to what else was available, I feel the exact opposite when it comes to public domain noir films. They're just the best. This first collection was a Brentwood home video release, originally released in 2004. It's such an old collection that the distributor itself has been defunct for over a decade as of 2024. It included the films, in order, The Stranger, 1946, Borderline, 1950, He Walked by Night, 1948, Call It Murder, 1934, kind of an outlier, The Red House, 1947, DOA, 1950, Kansas City Confidential, 1952, Detour, 1946, The Second Woman, 1951, and Scarlet Street, 1945. None of these are gonna break an AFI top 10 list anytime soon, but it was a great introduction for me. Once home after buying this collection, I went into my tiny, slightly off-balance bedroom in the old cottage-style home my family lived in, and I chose, for my first noir to watch, Detour. I honestly think I chose it at the time because it was the shortest film in the collection at just over an hour. In what could be argued by some as a bad omen, I actually fell asleep about 20 minutes into it. But I did finish it. The main outlier, again, is probably 1934's Call It Murder, which also went by another title of Midnight, which is the 130s film in the mix, and one I'd argue is not quite a noir. Scarlet Street is the one in the mix that just broke me. As a major Edward G. Robinson fan, watching him as a docile artist being abused and manipulated by just about everyone he encounters the whole movie, only to end up mentally broken by the end, is really hard to stomach. In fact, this film was actually banned in several American cities due to how dark it was. So it's not just me. While some films are stronger than others, I found myself enjoying every single one in this mix. Again, later I would be developing a more robust noir collection, but it still started with public domain features. About a year after this first collection, I bought a 9-movie collection put out in 2007 by St. Clair Entertainment Group. Established in Canada way back in my birth year of 1985, they're one of the oldest still standing distributors known to have a focus in putting out public domain content. This collection had a few repeats from my first one, but it only cost me a couple of bucks. New films from this collection included Too Late for Tears, 1949, The Man Who Cheated Himself, 1950, The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, 1946, The Hitchhiker, 1953, Quicksand, 1950, and The Scar, also known as Hollow Triumph, released in 1948. Of these new entries, at least upon my first viewing, The Hitchhiker definitely left the strongest impression. Directed by famed actress Ida Lupino, this was the first mainstream film noir directed by a woman. Among later purchases included a 4-disc, 16-movie collection of public domain mobster movies, which included noir pictures like Woman on the Run, 1950, The Chase, 1946, Port of New York, 1949, and The Big Combo, 1955. And then, during a time where I was embarrassingly obsessed with having as many movies as possible, I bought a mix of 100 movie collections, or 50 depending on which one it was, that were put out for next to nothing by Mill Creek Entertainment. One of these was a dark crimes/mystery classics combo of 100 movies that included just about every public domain noir you could ask for. Fresh noirs in this collection, as opposed to my previous collections, included Fear in the Night, 1947, Impact, 1949, Trapped, 1949, Suddenly, 1954, and Please Murder Me, 1956, among others. Again, this is where it all started. Now, I could go on for a week and a day about these films, some revered and many forgotten, but time is attention, and attention's something I'd like to keep, so to break even, I'll focus the next discussion on what I would say are my top 10 favorite, in order, public domain film noirs. First, an honorable mention to 1947's Fear in the Night. You gotta love that mirror sequence. And 1950's The Man Who Cheated Himself. A decent crime flick, but with a slightly underwhelming climax. And now, on to the top 10. Number 10, Impact, 1949. A slightly overlong but equally underappreciated film featuring Brian Dunleavy, presenting the lengths one will go to when their wife wants them and thinks them to be dead. And it had a car crash using models that is... it's just the best. Number 9, Kansas City Confidential, 1952. One of the first noirs I ever saw, driven by distinct close-ups and a vibe that's about as masculine as it gets. A robbery takes place and the wrong man takes the fall. While he's ultimately released, the ordeal turns his life upside down, driving him to try, at any lengths necessary, to find out who was responsible. Number 8, Suddenly, 1954. As a JFK assassination buff, it should be no wonder that this film made my list. Dominated by a tragic and yet hilarious performance by Frank Sinatra as a hired hitman gone to the small town of Suddenly to assassinate the president. Number 7, Too Late for Tears, 1949. The classic question of what to do when a big sack of cash falls into your lap. Do you do the safe and humble thing and turn it in? Or do you keep it? The solution to all your problems. A nice slice of drama driven by Lisbeth Scott and classic noir hustler Dan Duryea. At the time, the film was a box office disaster. Such a failure that one of its producers had to declare bankruptcy afterwards. Number 6, Detour, 1946. Again, the first public domain noir I ever saw, a film that kept me begging for more. Overlooked in its day, this classic B picture has established a grand following, even scoring a Criterion Collection release. Drifting along, Al Roberts, played by Tom Neal, decides to hitch it west to go see his girl. A man who picks him up along the way ends up dying, accidentally, in a way that doesn't look very accidental. So, who's gonna believe Al? Perhaps no one. Lots of drama and despair crammed into 67 minutes. Number 5, He Walked by Night, 1948. Perhaps a precursor to the Dragnet series, right down to Jack Parr playing a role in it, this film follows the cops and the criminal. Richard Basehart plays the lead antagonist, loosely based on Irwin Walker, who went on a crime spree in Los Angeles after serving in World War II. Seriously affected by his war experience, Walker came back deeply disturbed and began robbing places for money that he claimed he took to build an electronic radar gun that could reduce metal to a powder, a device he planned to use to force the government to pay its soldiers better, which would make the cost of war then too expensive. His crimes included the killing of a police officer, which, upon his capture, netted him a death sentence. He would die in 2008, with his sentence commuted to life. The one drastic departure from Walker's story in this film is the dramatic ending with a shootout in the storm drains under LA, a climax that many have noted is remarkably similar to that of the conclusion of The Third Man, done the following year and to much greater fanfare. Number 4, The Hitchhiker, 1953. Directed by Ida Lupino, this film is also based on a real criminal, Billy Cook, who murdered several people during a crime spree in the early 1950s. The film chronicles the end of Cook's spree when he took 2 men on a hunting trip hostage, forcing them to take him across the border into Mexico, where he was ultimately captured. Edmund O'Brien and Frank Lovejoy play the 2 hostages, with William Tallman playing the Cook character. A tight story rife with tension and desperation right up to the very end. And now my top 3. Number 3, even though some may argue it's only kind of a noir, it's in my collection. The Red House, 1947. A great performance by Edward G. Robinson in a role that is a far departure from the gangster stereotype he's most remembered for. The film maintains much of its secrets until the climactic ending, and yet keeps you invested the whole time, wondering why Robinson tries so hard to keep people from going into the woods alongside his property. Number 2, DOA, 1950. The quintessential B-movie noir. A fantastic opening scene wraps us around through a long flashback right back up to the present, or rather the ending. It asks, if you've been poisoned to death, what do you do before you die? Edmund O'Brien's answer was figure out who the hell killed me. And finally, number 1. It's hard to beat The Stranger, 1946. A cast consisting of some of the best, directed and starring the great Orson Welles and the iconic Edward G. Robinson, as well as Loretta Young, in a story of post-World War II intrigue in a small town. Gripping and with a very satisfying climax. No spoilers, but the Nazi dies at the end, so that's good.
There is a multitude of reasons a piece of work can end up in the public domain. In this case, considering a large number of noir films that have fallen into the domain are low-budget B pictures, lots of them probably ended up where they are because they weren't very successful in their day, and/or they were deemed forgettable enough that renewing their copyrights was considered not worth it. Films in this group that have gained notoriety Films like Detour, The Hitchhiker, and Too Late for Tears have done so in more recent years, long after their copyrights lapsed. Because copyrights last 28 years before renewal, and most of these films were done in the 40s, their copyrights primarily ended during the 1970s. With regards to these films from the collections that I've purchased in the past, there's little to say about how they ended up in the public domain beyond just their film went into the public domain because their renewal wasn't done. There are exceptions to this. For example, DOA went into the domain after a filing error kept it from being renewed in time. I know rules are rules, but in this particular circumstance, it seems like a situation where you just let it slide. But hey, now you can find the film for free or on the cheap everywhere, so their loss is our gain. While the idea is that we are transitioning from my childhood to my early adult years, from cartoons to gritty old films, and from VHS to DVDs, it's important to remember what got us here. More specifically, from the start of public domain distributors to the mid-2000s. If you missed my previous two-parter on public domain VHS, first, go watch it. But otherwise, I want to just briefly gloss over the history leading up into the 2000s. Simply put, by the mid-1980s, VHS had become the next primary consumer format, powering ahead of Betamax. With this came a saturation in the realm of public domain distributors putting out content on VHS. Some of these distributors had a decent reputation, but most put out whatever they could get their hands on however they could. It was all profit anyway. And in an era where most VHS titles were going for around $50, these places could put out content on the cheap, throwing a net out and drawing in a larger crowd. Beyond the fact that many of these distributors were putting out low-quality copies of various works, some were certainly darker than others. While these distributors claimed to use new tapes, or sometimes previously used tapes that had been erased completely, there were numerous instances wherein parents discovered adult content on their kids' cartoon tapes. And some even created kids' clubs, gathering information on children that was often used with ulterior motives. Not good. And obviously, as public domain products, these noirs were no stranger to releases on VHS back in the 80s and 90s. They were fixture releases through some companies that anyone with the public domain knowledge would remember: United American Video, Diamond Entertainment Group, Madison Entertainment Group, and VCI Home Video. And it's not a wild stretch of the imagination to assume some, if not most, of these VHS copies were atrocious quality. By the time DVDs became available to the public in 1996, most of these early distributors were long gone, and some of those still in existence were functioning under new names. For reference, the two public domain cartoon collections I obtained in my previous videos were released by VidTape Inc. and United American Video. VidTape Inc. started in 1989 and was defunct by 2000. United American Video, my go-to as a kid, started in 1984 and converted to the Sterling Entertainment Group before ceasing operations in 2006. And on that note, let's get to in my public domain cartoon video, I took the time to discuss some of these many public domain distributors that popped up during the 1980s with the explosion in VHS popularity during that time. As the 90s came along and we pushed towards a new millennium, that popularity transitioned to DVDs. So, of course, these companies would ultimately begin making that transition too. Companies that distribute public domain content today, however, are not quite as interchangeable as they were in the 80s, seeing as, for some of them, public domain content is only part of what they put out. And some of these companies are just pieces of a much larger conglomerate. While many 80s companies had fizzled out by the mid to late 90s, we started to see a small flurry of new ones in the early 2000s, most of which came and went rather quickly as they suffered from the same issues prior companies did, namely poor quality transfers of the content that they released. One of these was Passion Productions, which accidentally would sometimes release content that wasn't in the public domain. Founded in 2002, by 2003 they were bought out and their name was changed to Miracle Pictures, which managed to last just barely into 2004. Rummaging through my nonsense collection of movies, I found I had an example of both. I have a Passion Pictures release of the 1972 Kirk Douglas film The Master Touch, a rather bland heist film I mostly love for its absurd and overall flawed car chase. And I also have a Miracle Pictures release of the 1971 Lloyd Bridges almost noir film, A Tattered Web. It even has a cool noir title, and a kind of over-the-top, ridiculous, hard-to-believe killing. Then there was Digiview Entertainment, which put out content during the first decade of the 2000s, most of which was distributed in various stores like Walmart and Dollar Tree. In fact, I've snagged a few Digiview products, specifically from the Dollar Tree I used to live by. These include the semi-noir films The St. Louis Bank Robbery from 1959, an early Steve McQueen vehicle, and The Basketball Fix from 1951, both films based on true events. Today's companies that still put out public domain content range greatly in quality, as they pretty much always have. Originally New Age Video from 1985 to 1991, Alpha Video has put out a lot of content over the years, and for the most part, it ain't great. Oftentimes, the features don't fit the screen well at all, and quality is pretty hit and miss. One thing I do love about one of the Alpha Video releases I bought, a take on the Jonestown tragedy, is that it includes a plethora of trailers ranging from 60s and 70s exploitation films to films produced at barely the level of a college student. Perhaps one of the most prominent contemporary companies out there, if nothing more than for their output, is Echo Bridge Home Entertainment, formerly the Platinum Disc Company, from 1995 to 2006. These guys have made some money off of me. Just about any massive collection of content they put out, I've bought, including an 8-disc collection of Charlie Chaplin's silent films and multiple 50-movie packs, as I've already shown once in this film. Understandably, the quality varies, but every so often it's not that bad. What really does suck, more than anything else, is that in a lot of their releases, the company's logo appears periodically in the corner of the screen, like you're watching a movie on a cable station or something. While the company that put out the first collection of noirs I bought has been defunct since 2013, my second collection came from the St. Clair Entertainment Group, which is described as a discount distributor putting out a lot of public domain content. And on the other end, there's companies like Mill Creek Entertainment, another one I've purchased from, who puts out a good deal of other licensed content as well as their own content. They're a go-to of mine for some decent crime and serial killer type stuff, even if they do kind of recycle content. And all of that said, My collections of public domain noir are obviously by no means the only collections out there. For fun, I went in and scoured the Amazon reviews for collections available out there. What actually surprised me is most of the reviews, granted some collections had very few, aren't too bad. Very few 1 and 2 star ratings. First, a 10 classic films collection put out by Timeless Media. Overall, it has a 4.5 out of 5, with most reviews being positive and noting that it's a good bang for the buck. Granted, if you're not too bothered by quality, just about any public domain collection can be a good bang for the buck. This was a 2-disc collection with 10 movies crammed onto them. And in an instance like that, you're gonna sacrifice some quality. One particular review said that the quality was like that of someone recording the movies with a camera and then burning it onto a disc, sort of a bootlegging sort of thing. Some even argued most of the content was not noir. Based on the content that I saw in this collection, I don't know what collection these people ended up buying. It is worth noting that some reviews on Amazon products are repeated on other products altogether, with some reviews not remotely going with the products in question. So sometimes this stuff just ain't that reliable. That said, then there's the Dark Mysteries collection put out by the Film Chest Media Group. This collection consists of 3 releases, one with a blue case, one with a red case, and one with an orange case. The blue has a 4.5 out of 5, the red has a 4.6 out of 5, and the orange has a 4.4 out of 5. Granted, I feel like the orange one has the weakest collection of content, likely explaining its slightly lower score. Most complaints were about fuzziness to the movies, in particular with the film Detour. With these releases being 3-disc sets, meaning at least 4 films to a disc, it's surprising to see so many reviewers calling the quality decent. Film Chest put out another Best of Film Noir collection that got solid reviews as well, aside from some oddities, such as one reviewer who said one of the 3 movie discs just didn't play. I had a similar issue with a Cary Grant Vault collection that I bought, where the first few times I put the disc in, one of the features didn't play. But after that, it worked fine. The issue just went away. There were also a few reviews critiquing the fact that the films had subtitles, something that's actually fairly rare in public domain releases. But the issue was they only had subtitles in Spanish. This is a bit odd, but just let me say, if you need subtitles and you want to buy films in the public domain, buy them from more reputable sources. Otherwise, you're likely to be stuck with nothing. My noir collection from St. Clair has a slightly lower score than these other ones, with an average of 4.2 out of 5, which is understandable. Some of the features are a little rough and fuzzy, but others are pretty solid, as far as I'm concerned. And as far as my 100 movie pack of dark crime and mystery films from Mill Creek, it's rocking at a 3.7 out of 5. 100 movies crammed on about 24-25 discs. You are going to get what you pay for. And these are double-sided discs as well, with 2 movies on each side, with a few exceptions. But amidst the minor criticisms, I vibed really closely with one particular comment in a review. This individual compared the somewhat mediocre quality of the features in this collection to watching old movies that used to play in the middle of the night back in the days when TV channels used to go off air. Now, why have I spent so much time comparing and contrasting the quality of these different public domain releases? Well, because I have multiple copies of many of these movies from different collections, which means I can do some quality comparison tests and see which collections have the best quality versions of those films, if one is really better than the other. So let's dive in. So here we are. Me, my TV, my movies. So I am going to be playing every version of a film noir that I personally own, wherein I have at least 2 copies, 2 versions from, or a version from 2 or more different distributors, to see which ones I feel are better quality, which ones are worse quality, or whether there's any real difference between them. And I'm gonna grade each individual version of each movie on a scale of 1 to 5. We're gonna start with, I'm gonna just keep it easy, I'm gonna start with some movies from the very first collection I ever bought, although this is, I purchased it again, because I lent it to my friend many, many years ago and I just never got it back. And this version actually is missing the last disc, which is The Second Woman and Scarlet Street, but whatever, it is what it is. I really have it more just to, to have and to hold. So let's start things off with The Stranger. 1946, a lot of good actors. This is how you know you've learned a lot, because I remember the copies on here being really good. The version of The Stranger from here, I'm gonna say it's a 2 out of 5. It's actually it's real scratchy, it's a little bit blurry, audio quality not great. Alright, so we're trying The Stranger from this would be my St. Clair collection. This one right here. Alright, let's see what we're fooling with here. Whoa, hello, kitty. Okay, this is definitely a brighter version. It's a little bit more crisp. It's not fantastic. But okay, it's definitely brighter. Yeah, see, it's not fantastic. I'll give that a 3 out of 5, though. It's definitely better. Better of the 2. However, we're not done, because we've got my 100 movie pack version. I don't know. Maybe this version's better. I want to doubt it, but who knows? They might throw a curve. See, the only important thing to remember with public domain is it all comes down to what version of the film they got their hands on. Sometimes you get your hands on a good copy. The sound's already shitty. There's a lot of audio feedback. Background. Pretty pixelated. Video quality is definitely better than the first one, but that's about all that can be said. I'm giving that a 2.5, because I can't give it as good as the second one, but it's definitely better than the first. So far for The Stranger, this, in my opinion, is the best version. Let's see if this collection can redeem itself to a degree. Alright. Of course, volume matters. Alright, this is pretty crisp, actually. You can see some pixelation, but it's not overly distracting. Some redemption. I'm gonna give He Walked by Night from this collection a 4. It was actually pretty clean. Perhaps, for all we know, the greatest cut version ever made is from this collection. Shit, I don't know. Also, my cat is friskying for dinner, so that's what this is all about. Okay, this is clearly a weaker copy.
How are you?
It's not horrendous.
Marriage come off all right?
A 3. Next, I already know how this one's gonna go down. Next is, I actually just watched this movie in full the other night. I watched the colorized version, which I didn't even know existed. The Red House. The main soundtrack song is awesome. All right, Red House. Okay, it's a little scratchy. Now, I'm not necessarily gonna grade down for it being, because it's actually pretty clear. I mean, it's definitely a scratched up print, but that doesn't bother me as much as super pixelation or blurriness, and it's actually pretty crisp. There's just a lot of scratches on it, and there's a line at the bottom, which that's a pretty significant issue. Now, I think this, because I do not remember ever seeing that on my old collection, and I watched each movie on here multiple times, so I'm guessing that is an artifact of this particular release. So that's a little bit of a deal breaker. So I gotta give it a 2. I would give it a 3 for general quality, but that line, I gotta give it a 2. I'll give it a 2.5. I actually distinctly remember trying to watch the version of Red House on here, and I remember it being utterly horrible. Now, maybe I didn't realize how good or bad this version was, so I may be exaggerating things, but I remember this being, in particular in this collection, I remember this being a really bad version of the Red House. Oh, yeah. Ooh. This is a rough. Oh, God. Yep. My memory did not fail me. We have got, it is blurred out. It is blurry in general. The audio is really bad. Yeah, this is a 1. This is what qualifies as a 1 out of 5. It's unfortunate because it's a great movie, but they dug that copy of it out of the trash somewhere. All right, next. Ooh, here we go. This is a good one. This is one I got 3 versions of. DOA. So I've got a version on this collection, I got a version on this collection, and I got a version mixed in with this crap somewhere. You want to watch some movies? Stella, you want to see the DOA? Alright, it's a pretty beat up copy, which in the broad scheme of things I actually love. I love a good beat up copy of an old movie. One where it actually looks like you're seeing like an original reel almost of it, not like fuzzy, like it was just a bad transfer. The blacks are actually very crisp. I'm gonna give it a 3.5. All right, let's see, St. Clair can beat a 3.5. Stella. Okay.
Sailing for Buenos Aires tomorrow, some week.
I'll send you a postcard. Now get out of here.
Who are you going with, George Reynolds?
George Reynolds, that son of a
You've never heard of
bitch.
Eugene Phillips either.
Alright, it's a little...
Never mind who I am with.
Okay, so this version, and again, I'm eyeballing this. This is not an exact science. This version's a little bit more beat up looking. It's definitely a little bit more blown out. It's not terrible. I'll give it a 2.5. This version's got to beat 3.5. Somehow, I don't think it's going to do it. DOA version 3. Let's see what we got. Maybe Mill Creek Entertainment will shock me. Okay, well, just at the start, it's jumping a little bit, and the sound is muffled as shit. There's almost a vignette to it on the sides, which is kind of cool, but... yeah, this is pretty crap. Audio's bad, it's blown out. It's definitely beat up. This is a 2. It's not the Red House from earlier, but it's pretty bad. Next on the list, Kansas City Confidential. First disc, again, from this collection. A little beat up. It's not terrible. There's some lines, but the grain isn't really bad. I need to hear the people talk.
That is good. Then you have come to the right place.
Alright, I'm gonna 3.5. I almost, because I can forgive a couple little lines for brief moments, so I almost consider giving it a 4, but the sound is just enough. Alright, so this is the second version of Kansas City Confidential from this collection. I wonder if that line will show up. Yep, the line is there. Maybe that's just how the original was, so every other version. Picture's actually real clean so far. I mean, for what I was expecting. There's some, and I would expect more pixelation with these. It's 4 movies on 2-sided discs. Well, another thing, I want to hear some people talk. The sound quality is pretty good for an old movie. You know what? I give this one a 3.5 as well. It's a tie. I feel like there was, overall, this version was a little bit better on the whole visually, but this one had better sound and was surprisingly good quality. I was not expecting that. First noir I ever watched on my own from one of my own collections. This is Detour, which I have 3 versions of, one on each collection. Maintaining, and this is going to be the last one from this collection because, again, the last disc is missing. So there's going to be a few more on this collection that are also on this collection for me to cover. Alright, pretty beat the fuck up. I mean, that's how I like Detour. It's definitely fuzzy. Film is beat to shit. It's a little blown out, but not too horribly blown out.
But as much as I insisted I would have no part of her scheme, Vera was taking it for granted I would.
Alright. That's a 2. There's just too many things that are not solid about it. I know. It's ridiculous. I think this is the exact same copy. There's like a slight dark line on top. The blurriness is the same. The grittiness is the same. Yeah, and then it's really rough going into this scene. I think this is literally the exact same version of the movie.
Never know what's in store for you.
You know, though... Alright, I gave this version a 2. I'm actually going to give this one a 2.5 because I feel the sound quality is noticeably better. Doesn't mean it's great, but I definitely notice it to be better, which is strange because that, like, the quality between matching scenes is identical. Finally, the 3rd version. Wow. This is crispy. This is actually, like, really good quality. That's surprising. Maybe it deteriorates further down the line. Sound quality's good. I was not expecting... hello? You want to rate the movies with me? That's a 4. Wow. Stella, that's a 4. You like those noirs? Alright, so Stella, we're done with this collection, so you can do whatever you want with that one. Actually, did I take that disc out? Because I just realized the next movie, because now it's just down to these 2 collections. The next movie I was going to check is Too Late for Tears. Too Late for Tears is literally not just on the same disc, but it's on the same side in this collection as Detour. So let's just put that disc back in. I know. Too Late for Tears. The music wavered a little bit there. Okay, this is pretty beat up. Blurry, definitely. There's some blips here and there. Very blurry. I'm not... Because yeah, I don't think it's super duper pixelated. It's definitely blurry, though. Yeah, it's kind of jumpy. The sound quality ain't great. Yeah, there's like a background crackling sound the whole movie. That's like the whole movie, there's that crackling sound. See, now that's some public domain trash right there. I'm gonna give that a 1.5. That was pretty trashy. All you gotta do is beat a 1.5. Because film masters deteriorate over time due to natural causes, Sinclair Entertainment has digitally remastered this DVD to deliver the best possible quality from original material that is decades old. We hope you will forgive these imperfections and enjoy this classic entertainment in its current form. It's a nice way of saying, oh, we tried to clean it up, but there's only so much we can do. Why do I feel like that's just bullshit to cover up shitty quality content? Let's see if Too Late for Tears is how deteriorated it is. Okay, this looks very similar to the one I just put in. Sound quality's a little better. It's definitely crisper, but not by much. Pixelated. Pretty scratchy. I mean, there's a little bit of blurriness. It's kind of a rough print. I'm gonna give that a 2.5. So, nothing to write. Why did I eject that disc? The next movie I want to check is on that disc. Anyway. Alright, The Man Who Cheated Himself. Decent flick. Almost made my top 10. Alright, it's a little shaky, a little jostly. It's definitely a somewhat beat up print, but it's fairly crisp for public domain. It's doing a lot of moving.
That's not what bothers me.
What is the matter?
It's just crappy and it is fairly crispy, but it's a pretty beat up print. I'm gonna give it a 2. Maybe on another day I would give it a 2.5, but today it gets a 2. Man Who Cheated Himself. This version. It's definitely a cleaner copy, I can immediately tell. Pretty crisp, pretty clean.
She finally caught up with you.
Not in love with the sound quality. It could be a 3, but the sound is very scratchy, and actually I don't know why I just did that. Because I have another situation where the 2 movies on the same side of the disc are 2 movies I want to review. So, I've only seen this movie once. I don't even really remember it. Maybe it would crack my top 10 if I watched it again. The Strange Love of Martha Ivers. I could already see some serious pixelation there at the start. Maybe it's just that the font is really tiny. A little blown out. Not terrible. That's a solid 3. Didn't blow me away. But not too bad a quality for this particular collection. So now we're going to check out Strange Love of Martha Ivers from this collection. Hello, kitty. Hello. Alright, this one looks a little cleaner as a whole. It's a little blown out. There is some blown outishness. Sounds pretty scratchy, and I'm starting to see a few more defective spots in the film. It definitely started out a little more clean. That's a I'll give it a 2.5. It doesn't matter, it still loses. I mean, if there's any lesson I'm taking away from this, it's that the ones you assume are going to automatically have the slightly better versions is not always the case, which I kind of feared might. You know, I try to keep my mind open, but I would totally assume that the versions of these movies on these collections would be better than these ones, just because there's a lot more movies. There's 4 movies crammed onto one disc as opposed to 2 or 3. This one has lower overall ratings, so I would expect. But there's been a few times where these versions on here have blown these out of the water. Saw this one the other night too. A Mickey Rooney film noir. It's actually a pretty decent movie. I'm not gonna blow anything out of the water, but okay, there's definitely some solid. I'm seeing the pixelation pretty solid on this one, especially around the titles. But it's fairly clear. It's not terrible. You know, if it wasn't for the pixelation is just bad enough. I would have given this a 4, but I'll settle on a 3.5. 3.5, that sound good? 3.5? She'll think about it. All right, so let's see how this version of Quicksand is. I'm definitely noticing a decrease in video quality. Yeah, there's a lot more crackling in the audio. It's passable video quality, passable audio quality. 2.5. That brings us to our last one, which is The Scar, or also known as Hollow Triumph, which I'd only seen once many years ago, and I actually watched it again the other night, and it's okay. I feel like it really just kind of drags in the middle, but there's good elements. So it's an okay noir. It's actually pretty crisp so far. It actually is. It's definitely a little beat up. It's fuzzy, but it's more like it's just a really old version, which might be the reason why it's fuzzy as opposed to just a bad transfer. Yeah, the audio's pretty scratchy. It's not horrible quality though. I'll give it a 2.5. All right, it's down to this. Just The Scar. Here we go. See if you can beat a middle of the road 2.5. Okay, it's jostling around. I'm getting the feeling the video quality is going to be a little worse. It's not too bad. It's definitely a little too dark in the dark scenes, which, I mean, noirs are...
Here it is.
Better hurry.
Audio's kind of but I feel like it's a little bit better than this, but the visual... So you know what? This is also getting a 2.5. Maybe that's anticlimactic that the last movie I tie, but I feel like this one was slightly better visually, like very slightly better, and this one was very slightly better on the auditory side. So those are all my movies that I have multiple copies of, and I was actually pretty satisfied to see that there was definitely a mix in there. There was some that looked like they were literally, you know, from different companies put them out, but they looked like they were literally the same copies of the movie down to like various little imperfections. And some were drastically different. So I got a little bit of everything, which is kind of what I was hoping for. So when it comes to these particular collections, you just saw where I landed in terms of quality. And as one might expect as a connoisseur of the public domain, regardless of what collection you buy, the quality is really going to fluctuate. It's really, a lot of the times, probably going to come down to each individual movie. Some are going to look pretty solid, some are going to look mediocre, and some of them are just going to look like pure crap. Now, because I spent so much time in my previous series diving into the intricacies of public domain distributors and how they worked, I didn't focus quite so much on that element here, but rather let the content speak for itself. And I had fun with it, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. As DVD overtook VHS, going from the 1990s into the 2000s, things like Blu-ray began to overtake the DVD going into the 2010s. The advent of streaming services and digital downloads, as well as popular viewing alternatives like YouTube and TikTok, have also had their effect, in that they've diminished the need for physical forms of media. The 2010s brought on a mass removal of DVDs from many a person's home, which one could see if they went to the right places. I've been a frequent visitor to pawn and hawk shops in my hometown of Portland, and I've watched how their selling methods of DVDs have changed over the years. When I first started visiting such places, around the dawn of the 2010s, DVDs were just another fixture among the various items they would sell. You could usually get 5 movies for $20. A while later, it became 8 for $20, and then 12 for $20. And the last time I purchased DVDs at such a place, they were going 15 for $20. And even in buying some DVDs that day, once at the counter, the guy working there pulled up a stack of other DVDs and told me to take an extra one for free. The guy sounded so desperate for me to take one more movie that I feel like I could have taken this free DVD outside and just stomped it into the sidewalk out front, and he still would have had a smile on his face. DVDs had become a nuisance for such businesses because so many people were getting rid of them, but fewer and fewer people were buying them. I remember a guy coming into a hawk shop once with a gym bag, a literal gym bag full of DVDs, and watching the guy at the counter who was just like, no way, man. And I remember the guy with the gym bag, who, admittedly looked a little sketchy, totally missing the point, responded with, "What? They're not porn." Back in the day, there were also lots of alternative places for discarded DVDs to end up. There was a used DVD place called Buybacks, by where I used to live, that set up in a recently shut down Hollywood Video. There was Warehouse Music near me and CD Game Exchange. But gradually, these types of businesses would fall by the wayside, leaving people with fewer places to take their unwanted DVDs. There's a limited few types of people that I would still see regularly looking for DVDs whenever I'd be out and about looking for them. Some are middle-aged folks that look like they're just trying to hold on to an old format, and I can't judge them there. But more than anything, it's people that, no judgments, clearly don't have a lot of money to throw around, so they still purchase the cheaper media format. My whole life revolves around trying to buy the cheaper options, so I get that as well. I mention this as I feel this correlates with the present-day world of public domain distributors. Just like with VHS tapes in the 80s, public domain content on DVD is about as affordable as it gets, still tapping into this target group of those who still regularly buy DVDs. This made me want to check the websites for still existing distributors of public domain to see what formats they're still primarily selling today, figuring it would still most likely be DVDs as they're cheaper to produce and easily accessible to more people, as well as those, again, who are most likely to still be out there buying DVDs. I discovered that, granted, it's not all that surprising, some places are selling massive public domain collections on flash and USB drives, as well as external hard drives. But beyond this, doing a general search for companies, I found a lot of them have very dated websites, which is cool and all, it's just interesting that most of them are like this. I'm guessing they just didn't want to spend a bunch of time building an elaborate website. especially since some don't even sell content through their websites. Beyond this, I was mildly surprised to find that some of these companies don't even have functioning websites anymore. The link to St. Clair Entertainment Group, where one of my collections came from, would not load for me at all. Even trying multiple links got me nowhere. And Echo Bridge, a pretty large distributor in this realm, had their website lead me to a place that clearly indicated that they had lost their domain, and thus the site was no longer accessible. But as far as the sites that are still functioning, I was not surprised to see that, for the most part, they still have a deeper focus on DVDs as opposed to, say, Blu-rays or even 4K releases. In particular, when I accessed Mill Creek's website, they had a good number of titles available on Blu-ray, but still not as many as they did on DVD. And Mill Creek has a pretty large number of titles, making it less of a surprise that they'd have a decent number of Blu-ray releases. But the most solid representation of what I figured to be the case came with Timeless Media Group, which functions under Shout Factory. In terms of what they have available based on format, they have 174 available on DVD and only 9 available on Blu-ray. And this is all as of right now, 2024. DVDs have been dying for over a decade now, and yet it still makes sense to me. While the decline of the DVD continues, along with the decline in having physical copies of various media in general, I wonder how far off we are from some serious DVD nostalgia, as has come along in the past with vinyls and VHS. I also wonder how much longer public domain-centered companies will have success in selling physical copies of content that can be found for free on YouTube and most streaming services on a dying format. And here's the thing about being a public domain distributor, especially now, is it's so easy to do. Obviously, depending on the copies of movies you have, I mean, there's little logistical things to think about, but literally, I could take my 12-and-a-half-year-old, about 12-year-old MacBook here. I could dump public domain content. I could probably pretty much rip it from these collections that I have. I don't think any of them have they're not going to have copyrighted versions of the movies for the most part, because that's part of the reason why they're doing public domain, is they're getting stuff that's not copyrighted. I could upload movie after movie after movie onto my MacBook with this external DVD player and burner, because the DVD player and burner on my MacBook burned out like 6 years ago. This is the technology I'm working with. I can plug this in. I not only can put these DVDs in and rip the files onto my MacBook, so I now have these movies on here. I can then take a, this one's not blank, but perceivably a blank DVD, pop it in here, and I can just, having software to burn DVDs is cheap as hell. A lot of computers, I don't know if they necessarily so much now because DVD is faded, but at least in the past, like this MacBook used to be able to burn DVDs, but this, I can run off copy after copy after copy after copy of movies right from here. And I can literally package them up. I probably, this is where money starts becoming a little bit of a thing. I'd have to invest a bunch of money in ink, because I'd have to be able to print off, covers for DVDs. If I wanted to be real cheap, people probably wouldn't use it because they'd be suspicious. I could use these little cheap plastic cases and just put a little thing on it, but a lot of people probably wouldn't buy from you if they looked like that. But again, like Alpha. This is Alpha Video. They are a, pretty well-known public domain distributor. They use burnt, see the purple? It's a burnt DVD. This is not like a professionally made DVD. They burned this copy off of some, whatever their system is. So literally I could run off copies of DVDs that are probably just as good as what they offer, and I can either use, black case like this, or even if I could find them for cheaper, these thinner plastic cases. Put them in there, run off, have some template to create, a very simple thing to put on with the case to give me just a little bit of credibility, you know, something a little bit nicer than, you know, just this. And then I would have to get the, you know, the paper, the sticker paper that you use to make labels for your DVDs, so I can put a little label on my disc. And I could pretty much have something almost as good as this, running off copies from my old MacBook in the corner of my room. I could churn out public domain stuff, and I could use a place like eBay to sell them. Some people, I've gone online and seen people like, oh, can I, you know, make and sell public domain movies? And people are like, yeah, you know, I mean, you gotta know what you're dealing with. And they've recommended places like eBay to sell your stuff. Like, that's how easy it is to sell stuff when the actual physical thing you're selling are, in this case, movies that nobody owns. So you don't have to ask anybody's permission. That's how easy it would be to do this. I could start my own public domain distribution thing from this little corner of my tiny apartment.